Trinity, he was thrilled that I was taking over the team and was so supportive to have me rebuild that program. Jim always had a kind heart and a kind smile. And when it came to hosting speech tournaments, nobody did it better than Jim and Jay, who, as you know, we lost in 2021. The Thelma Beeler Invitational was a tournament the students loved for its high level of competition and its warm welcome. The coaches, well, we love that, of course, but thanks to Penny and Claude in the hospitality lounge, it was perfection. We always looked forward to special touches like omelet stations and a complimentary massage chair from J4. Goodness knows the fellow coaches knew that a little shoulder work could help those of us who rode on a freezing cold school bus in January at 5 a.m. with a horde of anxious teenagers. Jim and Jay were a force to be reckoned with, especially at Lafayette in the 90s. I contacted our good friend, former speech coach and Kentucky High School Speech League director, Steve Meadows, and just at a glance, he mentioned to me 7 Kissel champions, countless finals, semifinals, students at so many different competitions. And of course, as you know, Jim was inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2005, and I believe Jay was 2007. I don't know why that didn't happen the same year. Maybe they wanted their own time. But according to the Kentucky High School Speech League site, the purpose of the Kissel Hall of Fame is to honor forensic colleagues who have had a long-term commitment to Kentucky forensics through their promotion of excellence in the study, preparation, and or performance of speech and dramatic arts in the state of Kentucky. And you have to have these qualifications. At least 10 years of forensic service in the state, significant contributions to Kissel, a high degree of integrity, outstanding service above and beyond the call of duty, willingness to help colleagues and students, a true commitment to speech and dramatic arts education, and a dedication to truly caring for individual students and their futures. I think we can all agree that those qualifications sum up Jim Combs in a nutshell. Finally, I would like to read a poem that I recall Jim and I sharing. We used to sing musical theater together and just all kinds of things when we were working tab or just hanging out in between those big gaps during national speech competitions. And this is a favorite of mine. It's by Khalil Gibran, and it's called On Friendship. And a youth said, "Speak to us of friendship." And he answered, saying, "Your friend is your needs answered. He is your field, which you sow with love and reap with thanksgiving. And he is your board and your fireside, for you come to him with your hunger and you seek him for your peace. When your friend speaks his mind, you fear not the nay in your own mind, nor do you withhold the aye. And when he is silent, your heart ceases not to listen to his heart. For without words, in friendship, all thoughts, all desires, all expectations are born and shared with joy that is unacclaimed. And when you part from your friend, you grieve not, for that which you must love most in him may be clearer in his absence, as the mountain to the climber is clearer from the plain. And let there be no purpose in friendship save the deepening of the spirit. For love that seeks aught but the disclosure of its own mystery is not love, but a net cast forth, and only the unprofitable is caught. And let your best be for your friend. If he must know the ebb of your tide, let him know its flood also. For what is your friend that you should seek him with hours to kill? Seek him only with hours to live. For it is his to fill your need, but not your emptiness. And in the sweetness of friendship, let there always be laughter and sharing of pleasures and beautiful memories. For in the dew of the little things, the heart finds its morning and will always be refreshed. And as we would say as speech coaches, Jim Combs, you are a 100 forever and always.
Nice touch at the end there, Rosemary. It's funny when you at his service on Second Prayers on Friday, the minister said, "I don't know if you all know this about Jim. I'm going to tell you something you don't know about Jim Combs. Jim liked to talk a lot." But the point of that was, he said, but there was never a time. He said, if Jim didn't rope you into a conversation, he said, but it was never about him. It was about experiences. It was about theater. It was about something he would have loved you. And he would always, so many times, he would talk about his mom. So many times he would talk about his students. And so many times he would talk about a former colleague. He would have loved her. Oh, she had a crazy sense of humor. You all have gotten along so well. So, yeah, sometimes you felt stuck, but what you gleaned during that time with him is what we remember. So, next up, we have principals. We have 3 principals. No, he didn't chase them all off. But first up is Mike McKenzie, Brian Jacobs, and Dr. Anthony Orr. You are on deck. If you don't do speech, you know what that means. When he's done, you come up.
It was good seeing Mr. Orr and Mr. Jacobs again, and I know that even though I'm by far the oldest, I still have more hair. First, a special thanks to Penny. Had Penny not texted or emailed me on a random Tuesday, I would have not known. So I was able to go see Jen the next day, which was right at the end. But also for putting this together, it takes a lot of energy. And she said, "Mike, what do you think about this idea?" I think it was a great idea. She said, "Can you help?" Oh, shoot. Yeah, so thanks to Mr. Orr for opening up the school today, and Mr. Jacobs for taking time out of the day, and for all the former students, teachers, parents that are here today to remember Jim. And I have a couple of memories, and they're built on, not so eloquently because I don't have a speech background, that I like to share, at least to me. Jim gave me a couple of gifts that have really shaped me to this day. My first memory comes from my first days, weeks, and years at Lafayette as a principal. First, a little background. To describe the pace of those first days, weeks, months, and years as dizzying would be a gross understatement, to say the least. Much like a first-year teacher, I was merely working to see another day. My brain was running 150 miles an hour all day long with a mental to-do list of tasks that, in my mind, needed to be completed that day. I did not announce it to anybody, but for me personally, I had a pillar or a principle that I wanted to operate on. And that is, I wanted to be sure that my door was never shut to do paper. Never. I never announced this. I tried my best because, after all, we were here to serve students and staff, not to serve paper. It would get done when we got done. So why do I share this? Well, beginning the 3rd or 4th week of my first year, like clockwork, every single day, Jim would come in and during his planning period and say to me, "Mr. McKenzie, are you busy?" "Jim, I'm not busy. I got 2,000 plus students, 180 staff members. I'm not." But I said, "No, Jim, come on and have a seat." I figured we had a 5-minute chat. New. I was very wrong. Here I was, a new principal. My hair was on fire, and the next day, Jim comes in like clockwork. This went on for weeks, months, and years. Now, eventually, it got to the point where I worked up enough nerve and said, "Jim, do you mind while we're talking if I do some other work?" And he said, sure, go right ahead. And he still kept coming in. Okay. And I've never seen myself. Yeah, because I really didn't know Jim. I was like, what's the deal here? Does he not have a class that he needs to plan for or something? A parent to call? Something. Who in his building has got that time? So we did this. But what I've come to realize is Jim was giving me a gift through these conversations. He saw the need to provide an island of calm for me. He saw the need to get me to take a pause every day, even if for only 30 minutes. He saw what I could not see. He sensed that if I ever hoped to have any success as principal of Lafayette High School, I needed to take a deep breath. In his own way, he was giving me advice that I was probably too stubborn had he just come right out and said it, to accept. He invested his time in me. He gave me a true gift that I will always look back on with fondness. The second memory of Jim, at the forefront of my thoughts, is his treating everyone as a friend. I never heard Jim use a crossword, never a cross thought, or anything. My guess is what I'm about to share, all of us can share the same or similar memory. During all of our daily conversations, it was the same thing. Mike, you're a good friend. Oh, the last time I saw Jim, he was in the hospital. Time was running short. We briefly chatted. As I was getting up to leave, he said 4 or 5 times. He said, Mike, you're a good friend. And my guess is he has said that same thing probably to most nearly everybody in this room. Using, he just, that's the second gift he gave me, is the gift that we all share. That is a gift of friendship. And so I thank Jim, and he is definitely a good friend.
You follow directions.
That's a hard act to follow, Mr. McKenzie. As I get older, I've been asked to do this a number of times, and it's never, ever easy. But I will say this one was particularly challenging, mainly because I knew who would be in attendance. I knew because of Jim's relationship, history, love for speech and debate, most of the people here today would have a strong background in that. That is not an area of comfort. I am still an immigrant to the public speaking world, so I'm going to do my best to honor Mr. Combs and his legacy. Go easy on me on the scores, please. I'm here today to celebrate and honor the life of Jim Combs. Part of which I feel like I only knew him for a very short period of time. I joined the Lafayette family in 2012. So essentially the last decade of his very long, fulfilling life. But got to know Jim very close as a colleague, as a friend. And he was the ultimate storyteller. And as I got to know him more, he would always share and educate me on everything from Lexington history to Lafayette history. And I can recall this really coming through in the year 2015. As a school, we were celebrating the 75th anniversary of the school. And I knew this was an important occasion. Mr. Marsh, I think of all the work you put into it. I see members of the Alumni Association here today. Mr. Combs was one of the first people I went to and said, Jim, I need your help with this. You know more about our school and our community than I ever did. And if you read his obituary, it'll tell you he was an educator for over 30 years, most of which was time in this building. But to say his relationship with Lafayette was only 20 years would be the biggest misrepresentation, because the guy can tell you stories from the 50s and 60s like they happened yesterday. Much to my chagrin, he said, you know what you need to do, Mr. Jacobs? We actually have an archival collection housed at the University of Kentucky that tells the story of Lafayette High School. And in preparation for this, you really need to go. Let me show you this collection. So, like, I put it off for a while. It was like one of those things I knew was important, but it never felt like it was the top priority. And we had one of those it was a Tuesday staff work day, but students were able to stay home. So I was like, you know what, Jim, let's go down to UK and you can show me the collection. Dear Lord. So we got through half the collection. Anyone want to guess how many hours we were down there? I mean, 4 or 5 from my recollection. We skipped lunch and we dug in, and it was story after story after story. And I don't remember a lot of the names that he shared with me or the relationships that he had with those people, many of which he only knew through his family and his sister's experiences here at our school. But I'll never forget how much pride he had in this place and how special he knew it was to himself to be a part of this, to be able to say that he gave his entire career to an institution that meant as much to him, probably only second to Second Presbyterian Church, if I'm kind of itemizing the amount of times he talked about things. He loved this school and this community with every ounce of his being, and just had a gift for remembering people and experiences, and he always celebrated it. It was never, even when he was frustrated, even when he was down on himself because he knew he wasn't his best version of himself, he always talked with just complete pride about how special our school and our students were. And I think about within our current context in this day and age when it's so easy to talk about the things in our life that are trivial, that are frustrating, that bring us anger. And he lived by a completely different model. And my hope is that by sharing stories of Mr. Combs and I think Donnie Young and so many of the others that we've lost, that maybe we'll commit ourselves to following the lead that he set for us. We all know about Jim's love for theater. He could talk for hours. If there was a show he didn't see, I don't know what it was, because he could tell you about any time we were considering going to see a show in Cincinnati or New York, he was my first phone call because I knew his guidance would always lead us in the right direction. But had a really awesome experience. I can't remember the year now, but we had a colleague in our building, Mr. David Scholl, who also did some community theater work and was cast as the lead in the Lexington Children's Theater production of Annie. He was Daddy Warbucks. And this was 5 or 6 years after Jim had retired. And for those of you who know him best, those last couple of years here were a real struggle for Jim. Never psychologically or emotionally, but physically. The work is hard and demanding. And I think it wore on him that he knew he was no longer the best version of himself when he retired. Ran into Mr. Combs with a bunch of Lafayette people who went to support Mr. Scholl at this play. And we were talking. And for those of you who worked with me, the teachers in the room can tell you, it's a weakness of mine because I'm a pleaser. And I always want to leave making people feel validated, special, and appreciated. It's one of my core principles, Mr. McKenzie. And in that moment, talking to Jim, and he's reconnecting with what has been a loss for him those last couple of years, not feeling connected to the school, and seeing how special that was to him. And I said, Mr. Combs, when are we going to get that sub-certification? And in my heart, I knew I was saying that to make him feel special. I had very little questions that he would actually follow through on applying, or that he even had the desire to come back and be a substitute teacher. Well, wouldn't you know that next day he called me and he said, "Hey, Mr. Jacobs, I can't tell you how much it means to me that you want me to be a sub in Lafayette. I've filled out all of my paperwork. My application is submitted to Human Resources. You call me and let me know when you want me." And so at the time, Miss Mattingly, she kind of ran point on all our sub placements and stuff. And I said, "All right, Miss Mattingly, Mr. Combs wants to come back and sub. Be good to him." I know everyone's really well versed on the sub shortages in our nation and how desperate we are for good people to come in and do that work. But I also knew I didn't want to throw Jim to the wolves. So we started out being very, very protective of Jim. What I can tell you is those 3 to 4 years in this twilight of his life where he was a sub in this building, he was the absolute best version of himself I ever saw. I could send him into any room and he would tell stories to the kids about how special this place was, people he'd worked with, shows that he had produced in Beeler Theater. He would tell them about Thelma Beeler. There's not a whole lot of people that can tell those stories any longer, you know, and so that it was really special seeing him. And I really think it gave him purpose. It gave him meaning. And I was so proud to see him have the energy and the spirit to contribute what was a real need in our building, which was someone who could go in and cover for Miss McPherson or Mr. Kirsendorfer or Mr. Mendenhall. And they'll tell you that he was one of their first phone calls during that time of period when they were looking for someone to come cover the hey, Mr. Matson. Snuck in. Didn't see you up there. Just wanted to share that experience. I know because Jim talked often and would always, his kindness was incredible because it was never about him initially. It was always about how's your wife? How's your lovely wife doing? Or how are Max and Jake? He knew my kids' names, and he would always ask questions about my family. He knew my mom was really special to me and would ask about her and how she was doing. But then he would always come with the invitation of, let's go grab a coffee sometimes, or let's go to lunch or breakfast. And regretfully, I never took advantage of those invitations as much as I wish I had, because what I think about a lot, especially in this moment right now, are those very intimate moments that I had with Jim, just sitting at a cafe table, having a cup of coffee, and listening to him talk about things that he loved, that he was passionate about. Because I know his faith was incredibly important to him, and a big part of his foundation was what he experienced at Second Presbyterian Church with his faith family. I did think it was important here today to stop, pause for a moment, and I would like to lead you all in a prayer on behalf of Jim Combs. So if you would, please bow your head. Heavenly Father, we come before you today with heavy hearts, but with also gratitude for the life of Jim Combs. We thank you for the years of wisdom, love, kindness that he shared with so many. Lord, we lift up his family, his friends, former students, colleagues to you in this time of sorrow. May they find comfort knowing that Jim is with you in your loving embrace, free from the pain of cancer and filled with joy of your eternal kingdom. Father, we also ask you bless this legacy that Jim leaves behind, the countless hours, lives he touched, the lessons imparted, the love that he gave so freely to others. May his memory live on in the hearts of those who knew him, and may his example continue to inspire us in the lives of service, compassion, and faith for years to come. In your holy name, we pray. Amen. Rest in peace, Mr. Combs. Jim, we love you. You have left Lafayette better than it was when you first found it. For that, we are forever grateful.
Well, the pictures on the hallway down the way are to be taken at face value. I'm the 10th principal of Lafayette High School. By some miracle that's hard to explain. That makes me, after 85 years, one of the smallest parts of the history of Lafayette High School yet. Mr. Combs took notice and care to share with me some of the nuggets and the richness of that history with me in my time here. And Brian, you were spot on in recruiting him as a sub for us because he was here every single day that he possibly could be until his health kept him from doing so. And so I got also the value of many of those conversations that welcomed me into the Lafayette family and the Lafayette family history, and I'm grateful for that. Jim's place in Lafayette history looms much larger for all of us than my part of the history ever will. While he cherished that history, what I sensed in those conversations with him, even more than the love of history, was the love that he had for the students, the love that he had for the staff, and the love that he had for the parents of both of those groups of people. We know as a group, we know that your presence here today is testament to that love. And I hope that in his rest, Jim is able to know the love and the honor that your presence in your very lives bring to him today. Thank you for letting me be a part of it.
So Dr. Orr did not have to let us come in here. I thank him. When I emailed him, he did, well, actually I saw him that morning, the morning after. It's like at breakfast, and he's like, just let me know. And so many emails. He never once said, you know what, it's a Sunday, it's a lot. Never once did he say that. He understood that we needed to be here in this space. Because once a general, always a general. I have a story for each principal that's here. Very short. As you know, Jim liked to talk. Jim would call me 2 or 3 times a week. And when he started subbing, yeah, physically it was hard. You know, to get that elevator key because, you know, the arthritis is setting in, it's getting older. But we talked about Mike McKenzie. Mike McKenzie was a good friend. He said, Penny, he said, the big stink he made out of it when I was inducted into the Kissel Hall of Fame, he got on the what do you call those things?
Intercom.
There you go. Why was that hard? Yeah. The next Monday afterward, he made an announcement and he just talked about me. He said, oh my gosh, I didn't know what to say. He said he was such a good friend. He said, Brian Jacobs was you say you're a pleaser, but Brian Jacobs had this gift of knowing when you needed something. And this is about Jim, but an example of that is when our last one, who graduated in 23, she was here through COVID and she struggled. And he saw me somewhere. I don't know where he saw me. And he said, how's she doing? I said, she's tanking. Right. She's not. He said, I'm not asking you about her classes. He said, how is she? He said, we'll fix the classes. How is she? And that meant something. And that was the heart that Jim Combs always talked about. He said, Brian Jacobs called me today. He texted me, sent me an email. He said, we're going to go have coffee. Jim loved his coffee, guys. Loved his coffee. But that's what he remembers about Brian. Dr. Orr, you got him strictly when he was subbing. And after you got here and, going through the growing pains and stuff, and he would call me and he said, Dr. Orr saw me in the hallway. You know, he speaks to me every time he sees me. He says, we don't really know each other well. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here and you're able to sub for us. So he knew each of you in different contexts, but understand that he knew and he saw you. Now, as far as his parents' perspective goes, I can't go too long because I'll lose it. But Jim and Jay put me in a mindset that I never thought I would be in. They showed me that that's what I said. They showed me that, hey, that's my grandkid, I can do that. They showed me what happens when a teacher invests in a child, in a student, right? My husband's an educator, my daughter's an educator. But I got to tell you, just watching them work with me and say, your daughter's a jewel. I saw your other kid walking down the hall the other day. She stops and she comes to my door every day after school's over. I'm Mr. Combs. That's my oldest. And then he sold one of them, her first car. I have a little bit of him in each of my kids. Kathy, I think, is the only one who had him in class. But he impacted all of them. And they really, really loved him. And they really loved Mr. Ford. But as a parent, as a speech parent, first of all, those 5 a.m. mornings on those school buses, I don't want to do that again. But he trusted us, not just to run the hospitality. We were the point for all parents, for all things, and he trusted us. So our understanding was this: if we do all of the yucky stuff, they can concentrate on the kids, right? And that's what we did. We took all the heavy stuff from Jay and Jim. All they had to do was focus on the kids. And we also understood very quickly that if you don't have an outstanding judges lounge and hospitality room, they'll eat the kids. Those ballots, they will eat the kids. And that's when you knew that just had peanut butter and jelly and Doritos. So we made sure, yes, you had omelet stations and potato bars and all that. Yeah, we had a chef. Her son was on the speech team and she stood there and she made omelets. But all that to say, Jim,
You got this, Penny.
the last 3 or 4 weeks that I was really able to talk to him, he would call me and he'd say, Penny, you're doing too much. Penny, I'm worried about you. You got to stop. Do you ever say no? And I'm like, Jim, he's like, I'm serious. I need you to take care of yourself. And I lied. I am, Jim. You know I was lying. I wasn't. But that was the person who surpassed being a teacher years and years ago. He gave my youngest, who was obsessed with Gettysburg for some reason in the Civil War, he had these figurines, these Civil War figurines, and he had these old black and white photos from Gettysburg, from different battles. He put them all in a box, gave them to her. She had them all over her room. Now, this kid is 19 now, so that's when she was like 15. I never understood it. We took her to Gettysburg twice. It's a good place, but I never understood it. But he fed into that. He fed into that. And I like Perry Mason. Well, Jim found out. And every year for Christmas over the last 10 years, I got Perry Mason DVDs. He told me, he'd say, going through my collection, okay, Jim. I knew what that meant. Because here he comes with 3 boxes to my house of old Alfred Hitchcock. Murder, She Wrote every season. And I took them all with a smile. I still have them. When Jim was your friend, Jim was your friend. And I appreciate, strictly as a parent, I appreciate what he poured into these babies. What Jake Jay taught me, because I never judged LD, Lincoln Douglas debate. I never judged it before. Jay, we need judges. He said we always have problems getting parents judging LD. So I judged LD. I said, but Jay, you got to teach me. He's like, I got you. We're in a hotel at some speech tournament, and Jay is literally jumping around the hotel room, jumping on the bed, pretending to wield a sword, and talk about the ag versus the neg. And I'm like, what does that have to do with the ag versus the neg? He said, you have to show them. Show them what, Jay? He said, the ath is just as emotional as the neg. And you stand there with liberty and you, okay, Jay, can you just give me the rules? Because I can't do that. When Jim trained you and asked you to judge, it was poetry, prose, storytelling, normal stuff. And he would give me little tidbits. He's like, don't eat the kids. He said, please don't be the one that goes very good, 100. And he said, that doesn't give him anything. He said, and make sure that when our kids are back on those buses and we're coming home, that those ballots come through us. Because we don't know what those ballots say. And we're going to protect these kids from these random acts of not niceness. So we would sit there on the front of the bus and we would go through all of those ballots. And then we can pass them back and let the kids see their ballots. I appreciated that. Because you were protecting my kid's spirit. Right? I'm not going to go much longer because we're getting to the meat of this. Y'all will be great. I have faith in you. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. Just a couple of other things. Jim, when we took over the hospitality room, I asked them what their favorite things were. Jay had to have orange juice and Mountain Dew. Jim had to have Fresca. And I made lasagna. So I'll make lasagna for the team and for them. So they would have lasagna and orange juice and Mountain Dew, and Jim would have lasagna and Fresca. Today, you all will have Fresca. I didn't make lasagna, sorry. But today you will have Fresca. And so looking at the order of your, these are all speech captains. I hunted them down. I hunted down some speech captains. And we're going to start with Jesse, Emily, Becky, and Kathy are on deck.
Do I have to use this?
You do not. You know better.
Well, I'm a lawyer, so I'm used to judging. Why you do that? So I got to ask.
Sustain.
Or I'm in contempt. So, we'll start off. I came to Lafayette during the year that Fayette County decided to move. It was all junior high, so I went to Jesse Clark Junior High. I was there with Jay, and they moved us up, and they moved the ninth graders up with us. And so that was when it became middle school, and so we were 9th, 10th, 11th. That's when Jay and Jim got together to create the speech team and try to, what they said, bring it back to its former glory. And it was a great experience. And I really can't talk about Jim or Jay without talking about both of them, because they were both distinct individuals. They were both wonderful individuals, but at the same time, they were very different and unique. And they certainly were the impetus of, during my time, a great team. A team that was there for me in multiple ways. And it wasn't just the speech team. That really wasn't the most important thing. And that was crucial. Jim and Jay were 2 of 4 teachers I had who had a lasting lifetime effect on me. And having 3 kids that went to public school and 2 kids that are going to private school, I was really shocked that that's a rarity. I mean, I think all teachers should be applauded for what they do, but Jim and Jay were just different. And to me, that was just such an impact. I was captain in 92 and 93. And really in that time frame, we went from really the bottom. Now, first year, a very smaller team, but we went to state. We're like 1 point away from getting to 10th. And they built upon that because the next year we did a little better. And then my senior year, I think we were the 3rd or 4th at the state. That was tremendous. and that was to them. I remember with Jim had a love of language. So hours upon hours upon hours in his room dissecting the language of a script. As a lawyer, that was invaluable for me to dissect the language. And his love of language was just so beautiful. And I didn't really realize that until I got older. And that love of language really compelled me when I got into the law. But it was during those moments, they really instilled in me a sense of finishing what you started. So when I was on the Jesse Clark speech team, didn't do a lot there, but my last year in Jesse Clark speech team, I didn't show up for regionals. I was sick, but I didn't call, I didn't let anybody know, and I kicked off the team. And so I moved up to Lafayette, and they gave me a second chance. And, Jim wasn't there, but I have no doubt that Jim's grace, Jim's mercy was a part of that. And I think they both kind of knew that I would spend the rest of my time during Lafayette speech team trying to make up for that. And that was just tremendous. That idea that we can have second chances, that we can be better than what we were. And basically, they both said to me, don't blow it. And that to me was just instrumental. Jim's kindness and love was just prevalent. And there was something about when I got sick, I always got sick either at regionals or at state. My voice was messing up. I couldn't do anything. And Jim always provided what he said was tea and lemon. I'm not quite for sure about that. But I am sure it was also that act of love and kindness that was part of it. And to me, that was just, I have not seen that with my kids' teachers. And I feel like that was just something that was so powerful. Jim was the second teacher that called me when one of my good friends, Dow, died. My junior year, Dow Roby, I'd done a duo with him the previous year. And Dow died. It was with Jay's house. There was a terrible, terrible accident. He was the second teacher to call me. And those hours in his room that was supposed to be rehearsal, that was supposed to be planning for the next year, when Dow was going to be a captain with me. You voted on captains, but Dow was going to be the lead on that. And that was just tremendous. To get through that, there's just no words. Talking about parents, my dad was very much an active part of the team. He was judging. He was with me at everything. And my dad actually continued after me. So I graduated and Dad continued to judge. He was always there. As a matter of fact, Dad told me in January of 97 that he had lost the battle of colon cancer. It was terminal. That March, he went to state tournament as a judge. And I was like, Dad, what are you doing? But Jim and Jay let him. And my dad talked about that almost up to the point of his death. And there was a moment, you got to think about this, at that time I was a young married man. I had a daughter who was a year old. Never in my wildest way I dreamed that my dad would not be around as an adult. And so I remember sitting in the visitation, looking at my dad's coffin, thinking about my daughter. And in walks Jay and Jim. They had sent flowers that I saw, and that was enough. But they drove from Kentucky to Tennessee. That's where my dad was buried. And they came. And that just is the quintessence of who they are. They were there when my first marriage ended horribly. They taught me about rising above that failure. They were there when I found a new wife. They came to the wedding. I remember Jim talking very, very, always, every time I saw Jim, he talked about being Tony's best man. Tony's name. And it just that love and kindness, I don't know where you get that from. Essentially, Jim was a substitute dad. Always there. I had all of a sudden, all my life, I wanted to do theater. I wanted to be a director. And all of a sudden, literally about right as my dad died, and after that, I decided to become a lawyer. They were the first people that I came to talk about that. And Jim looked at me, he said, I'm really not surprised. And when I graduated law school, he looked at me and he said, "I'm really, really proud of you." And he meant it. And I'm sure he said this to a host of people. But Jim, multiple times, almost every time I talked to him, he said, "You know, you're like a son to me." And I had the fortune of, at a moment, I was sitting in my car, got home, I just had a desire to call Jim. And I had not known that he had cancer. And this is actually a few weeks before he died. And we had a great conversation. And he told me about his diagnosis, but he was so much at peace. And it really makes me think that the reason was because he was such a kind man. I mean, his students were his kids, and he tracked them. I mean, I literally have known Jim for about 34 years. My dad died when he was 22. Jim has been around, has been there as a dad, along with Jay, for 34 years of my life, longer than I knew my dad. And that is the power of what they have. That's the love, that's the kindness. And so I want to leave this with some of my last words that I can only come to Jim. He will always, forever be in the annals of my heart, in my mind, and my spirit. Thank you for dedicating a little part of your life to me. I'm a better person because of you. God bless you, Jim. I won't say goodbye. I will just look forward to the day when I will see you again. Love you, brother. Thank you.
I have to have my support cap. Like Mr. McKenzie, just thinking about the fact of the people who are going to be here, the speech people, the drama theater people, I thought, wow, it has been a long time since I've stood up in front of a group of people. I'm a little nervous. So me and my pet will be fun. I do have something prepared, but I do want to also mention that I'm the oldest of three, and both my sister and my brother had Mr. Combs, and they were both actually also on the speech team. So my family was involved with the two of them for a long time. Jay ended up being my first adult team dog. You know, they really were well involved. So I'll get back to what my prepared speech was. No man is an island, or nowadays, a good person is an island. Please allow me to provide some context. My name is Emily Conaway Cottle, and I was an 8th grade speech team failure. 14-year-old me was pretty shy, and although I usually did my best to imitate a wallflower, for some reason I decided to try out for my junior high school speech team. I did not make the cut. A year later, I found myself a part of the first 9th grade class entering Lafayette High School. I remember walking into my civics class on day 1 and being thoroughly unimpressed with a stern-looking stick-a-lemon bud named Mr. Combs. He even had his class rules posted on the wall over the door, which was the only means of escape. Rule 1, talking stops when bell rings. Not sure if I remember that so well because I frequently heard his raised voice call out, "Rule 1, people," at the beginning of class. Or perhaps it was because our homework assignment wasn't supposed to write it 500 times. Rule 2, a lot is 2 words. I forgot that once on one of the tests that he gave. It did not go unnoticed. Mr. Combs, like many teachers, was setting a line that first day. He was there to teach, not to try and hurt a bunch of 9th grade cats. In short order, I was pleasantly surprised to find him fairly engaging. He explained things well and had a sense of humor that I could appreciate. He mentioned that he was one of the sponsors for the speech team and encouraged us to try out, which goes to show you that he must have been pretty persuasive too, because despite my past failures, later that week I found myself trying it for the speech team. I stood there in front of Jim Combs and Jay Ford reciting a favorite childhood story. Lucky for me, 1990 was a new beginning for a team that had been dormant for a number of years. The next Monday morning, I come into class, and at the beginning of class, Jim said something that sounded kind of like, "You made the team." Well, surely I hadn't heard him correctly. The class still hadn't gotten the hang of Rule 1, so perhaps I missed the "nt" part of the "didn't." The kid sitting next to me had heard the same thing, so I decided I was too afraid to ask Mr. Combs again in case he decided to change his mind, or in case I had heard him incorrectly. Perhaps it was out of desperation of trying to build a team roster from the ground up, or maybe just pity for the painfully shy kid who stumbled her way through a story from her childhood that compelled them to add me to the team. Regardless, I went to the first team meeting. They didn't throw me out, so I kept showing up. Looking back, I was given a true gift. I started to believe that maybe they saw some tiny spark in me that indicated that I had the potential to become a contributing team member. Jim worked one-on-one with me to help me decide what category of competition might be the best fit. Back to the words of Mr. Dunn. When I tried impromptu speaking, Jim cracked open a well-loved copy of Bartlett's Book of Quotations and said, "No man is an island." I'm not sure if that's actually what he landed on, or if it just felt that would be a beneficial phrase to me, for me to consider at that point in time. Even if you choose to live in complete isolation, you breathe air, you use resources, and are inevitably affected by the actions of others. In this metaphor, Jim wasn't just an island. To many of us, he was more like the ocean. He could be the calm that helps support us so we could stay afloat. Occasionally, one could get a glimpse of the turbulence underneath the calm surface. And when provoked, Jim was a force to be reckoned with. Jim believed the best in people until you gave him reason to believe otherwise. But once you earned his trust, he had your back. I suspect others may go into more detail, but Jim and Jay worked really well together. They really were two sides of the same coin. Good cop, bad cop, hip and cool, calm and collected. Towards the end of the 1992 school year, the speech team was devastated by the loss of a student. Jim was there for us. Jay was so distraught that he spent months under some form of sedation because those around him feared that he would take his own life. During that crisis, Jim embodied the ocean. He supported some of us personally. He single-handedly ran the team, and he continued to teach classes, all while trying to keep his friend Jay from falling over the edge. I have no idea when that man had to come to grief. Jim organized a handful of students to go visit Jay after the funeral. Jay needed to realize that, yes, some things should have been done differently, but the accident was just that, an accident. I had managed to hold it together for most of the week, but after watching the pieces of the man that had been Jay leave the room, I broke. Jim and the speech team supporter I fondly still refer to as Uncle Bill comforted me as I literally cried on their shoulders. Tony, now Becky's husband, and I started our duo interpretation partnership that year. I can't tell you how often Jim drove Tony and me to Jay's house. We would each have a chance to talk to Jay, and then Jim would go in by himself. I'm not sure how many students he took to visit Jim that way, but I didn't get the sense there were too many. The ocean that was Jim Combs was selfless, caring, and protective. He nurtured and encouraged everyone to be the best version of themselves. He had a story for every occasion. He knew pretty much everyone, and with his Eastern Kentucky roots, I swear was related to at least half of Kentucky. He had a really difficult time, I had a really difficult time trying to figure out what to say because there were so many examples of how he touched. It's gonna come out funny. How he touched my life. One time during an overnight speech trip, the same overnight speech trip, Tony and I. Tony forgot his belt. I forgot my shoes. Jim drove us to Kmart, and mindful of the general monetary constraints of teenagers, and more likely the background of our home lives, purchased those two items himself. First Demobular Invitational, I got a concussion right before, the night before. They made sure that I took care of myself and rested. I can't tell you how many rides Jim and Jay gave me on the way home after I would stay late to help with speech team behavior. I went to New York with Jim and Jay. Jim comforted me when I had a panic attack during a tornado warning at state competition. Jim could see through my crap. He would raise one eyebrow and let me know he was on to me, that he was watching. But he would sit back and let me choose how to handle that situation. I think Jim would forgive me for co-opting a few seconds to endorse something he felt strongly about, the arts, especially the arts in school. I had teachers that were instrumental if you'll pardon the pun, in making me into the person I am standing here today. My orchestra teacher, my Spanish teacher, and my two speech coach teachers. Through the arts, these educators introduced me to new cultures, let me test different ways of expressing emotions, allowed me to try on different personas. I learned how satisfying contributing to and being a part of a community could be. I developed empathy for the people whose roles I assumed. I was shown how to listen to others and adjust my contributions to better meet the needs of the group. Thanks to those who are here and support the arts, and thank you to the dedicated educators who give so much of your hearts and souls to your students. I come from a long line of teachers, so I know you don't hear it enough, but you make a difference. The full portion from John Donne's Devotions reads thusly: No man is an island, entire of itself. Every man is a piece of the continent, a part of the main. If a clod be washed away by the sea, Europe is the less, as well as if a promontory were, as well as if a manner of the friends or of thine own were. If any man's death diminishes me, because I am involved in mankind. My friends, although we have been diminished by Jim's death, the waves and ripples of his presence linger on. Thank you.
Y'all, I have to follow Jess and Emily. Oh my goodness. I'd like to point out that Katie provided us with little black books. So while my speech unfortunately doesn't fit in it, it's symbolically here with me. And I just have to acknowledge, I don't know which of you principals is responsible for this, but Jim lived that. I can think of nobody in my life as a student who better embodied love generally. I'm proud to be a general. I always will be. And that just seems like such a fitting tribute as we remember John. I knew I was going to try out for speech team long before I got to Lafayette. I was on Jay's team at Jesse Clark, actually with Jess. He seemed like one of those really cool kids, like 2 years ahead of me, and super intimidated by it. And I was pretty terrible. Like, most of my judging sheets came back to me with something like good 6. We all know that. So in the fall of 1991, though, I was determined to make myself better. I got to Lafayette. I had new shoes, a sense of optimism, and a map of the building in my hands. And my very second class on that first day of school was with Jim. And I learned he would also be coaching with Jay. And suddenly I was like, well, I obviously have to try out for this team. I already know one of those two guys. And I was a stickler for grammar, even at 14. So I have to admit to you that the words "a lot" with, the slash on the combined version of that really spoke to my inner grammarian and made me know that I belonged in this classroom. So yeah, I loved his class from the start. And it even made the idea of trying out for the team much less intimidating because I had a friend now in Mr. Holmes there. And I know I am not the only person in this room who has some trauma in their background. I'm going to tell you some personal details. But I also bet I'm not the only one who found a champion and an advocate in Jim. I never got to compete that freshman year because my stepdad in November and my mom pulled me out of school to transfer me to a private school as kind of a punishment. It's a long story. Jim was the only adult that day, that horrible day, as I was pulling my books off my locker and going around and returning things to each classroom. He was the only person who tried to prevent them from withdrawing me from school, who knew that that was wrong. And that was a brave step that led to me questioning what was going on in my life too. So brave that eventually that tiny spark, fueled by just having one adult suggest this is not okay, gave me the courage I never knew I had. Courage to shake my timidity and stand up for myself and get out of a truly unhealthy environment. Spoiler alert, I moved in with my dad. As an adult, I now know how many other people, some of you in this room, have my back. But then I didn't know that. I only saw that visible action from Jim, and it felt like I was utterly alone. And he opened my eyes and fundamentally changed my perspective about who I was and what I could be, and that I did not have to put up with the way that I had been treated. So I came back to Lafayette the next year, and I would not have faulted either Jim or Jay, knowing that they had had kind of a disagreement with my parents, for being like, you know what, we'll pass on this kid. We don't need this drama in our lives. Let's not. They gave me another chance. And I was on the team again. And boy, it was like I had found my family in high school. I went from being this weirdo, gawky, oddball, misfit, I think all of us can relate to that, to feeling like I had a sense of community and belonging with speech team. Speech team became a place where I could express the real me, not the face that I put on for the rest of high school where I was trying to fit in, be cool and hip, but the actual me that, loves the Muppets. Full disclosure, Jim is Bert, Jay is Ernie. Nailed it. Yeah, I carried a violin case with me everywhere. I spent hours writing stories in my bedroom, and that was all okay with this group of people. This was my family. Jim was kind but honest with feedback. He and Jay let me and my friends camp out in his room at lunch when the cafeteria got to be a little too much for us, with all of the jocks and the cheerleaders and all the things. And I'm sure that probably disrupted their own lunch break. As an adult, I've come to realize what a sacrifice that was for them to have all these kids in their room all the time. They had to push me out of the classroom a few day. They had to make me go home. They nicknamed me. Jim's nickname for me was Beccasaurus. I still wear that one proudly. Jane called me Becky the Bruce. They encouraged me. No, that's true. I have it on a t-shirt. They encouraged me. They helped me build my self-confidence, which I really didn't have before that day. And you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, I might be the only speech team alumnus that is actually doing as a career what I did on speech team. Maybe Kim Dixon counts. But I am the news director of a radio station, and I competed in radio broadcasting, and it's just wild to me that that's how my life turned out. But I never would have found the confidence without that encouragement. I still have their old landlines memorized, 278-4906. Yeah. I was the team secretary for a little while. I still actually have a lot of your landlines memorized. So I wish I could make that space in my head be used for something else, but here we are. Can you believe we ever successfully gathered at a specific day and time for team meetings or parties or tournaments even in the era of landlines and voicemail and paper notes folded into little shapes and put in lockers and morning announcements? I mean, it is
Did anybody pay attention to morning announcements?
Morning what?
Right. I was a little puzzled one day when the principal called me down. What on earth had I done? Why was I being called to the principal's office? I'm the friend who talks my friends out of doing the stupid stuff. I always have been, I probably always will be. But it turns out Jim had suggested to Mr. Reynolds, who really didn't like doing the announcements, that he asked me to do it as a way for me to practice my broadcasting skills and to hone them a little bit and build some more of that self-confidence. So every morning for part of my junior year and most of my senior year, I walked down to the office at announcement time, and if you were actually paying attention, I said the pledge to you. Jim had a big heart. Long after I graduated, he would ask me how my dad and my sister were doing. He, up until like weeks before he died, would ask me. And that was evident all along. I'm going to make a joke. It sounds like it's going to be inappropriate, but bear with me. This one time at Boone County, we all got snowed in. We had to stay an extra night in our hotel. It was a complete disaster. Kentucky snowstorms, they shut the state down. And one of my colleagues in the radio broadcasting squad caught the flu and shared it so gracefully with the rest of us. One of my favorite memories of Jim, and at the time it was not a good memory at all, was that he stuffed me some Tylenol. I was standing outside his door wearing long johns underneath a pair of pajamas and the blanket from the bed in my room going, "Mr. Combs, I think I'm sick." And he got me some Tylenol. Now, I don't know, for those of you who aren't teachers, maybe you don't realize that's kind of a no-no. I've never told that story before today. So I've kept his secret. More than once, I know that he and Jay paid for entry fees or other costs when a team member couldn't. One of our 90s era teammates who couldn't be here today asked me to share one of her stories on the many ways that Jim was a friend and a mentor long after we stopped walking these hallways. Heather Bowman Chapman wound up kind of an unexpected coach, accidental. Her husband had landed a job over at Bryan Station and they wanted him to coach the team. And he knew nothing about it. And she knew just enough to be dangerous, like most of us. So she found herself, on a Saturday morning in November doing her very first tournament and having no idea what she was doing, right? It's a very different experience on that end of things. I don't know how Jim knew this, but I think he was a natural empath. He looked at Heather, he saw the deer in the headlights, and he stepped in and generously picked up her stress and her anxiety, took her under his wing, and offered advice, answered questions, in spite of the fact that he was still coaching kids and had his own job to do. He was never too busy to make time for us, in school or out of it. We may not be his biological family, but I really believe that we were his kids. Jim, at my wedding, you toasted us and you spoke about 2 kids and said all kinds of wonderful things that we probably didn't deserve. But one of the things was that it had been your privilege to share our high school years. The privilege and the honor was actually ours. I am who I am, better than I would have been otherwise, for having Jim as a friend and a mentor and an adopted uncle. Thank you.
Hello. I also have a binder, but I got to cheat because I brought them from my school, so I had time to shove mine in the pages. Despite it being in the binder, it is not a poem, but that was one of my categories. So before I get to what I prepared, just a little bit about me. My name is Kathy Christian. In the program, Spalding is my married name. I started speech team in 6th grade because my dad made me, and I never looked back. It was awesome. I did it at Morton Middle School and then again at Lafayette. Yes, thank you. It was needed. It was needed, which I'll get to in a little bit. But speech team, as many of the others have said, became my home. The speech team, one of Mr. For's room, Mr. Combs' room, and the choir room were where I lived. In high school, back in the foolish days when I thought I wanted to be a dentist until I realized that I hate science. and decided to pursue music instead. But the arts and just being a part of them is a lot of what turned me into this version of myself. And so when I was doing speech team, I was on the team with them from fall of 2005 to spring 2009, and I was captain my junior and senior years. That was back when state was still at WKU, and it was great. And so we had the WKU Western tournament, so lots of hills, lots of snow, and lots of trying not to trip. Got my first real suit, I think, junior year. One of my senior year co-captains went shopping with me because I could get my own suit that actually fit me properly. As you can see, I'm quite tall and clothing is hard. But I finally got my own real suit, fit in with the rest of the cool speech kids because who does fit in with the cool speech kids? But just being a part of that environment meant so much. And always, every year, going to state tournament or to WKU, if we had to, coming from Lexington, we stopped at E-Town, and where there was a Wendy's and a Burger King across the street from each other. You could pick one of the two, and that was the option. And there's a lot more restaurants around there now. But I live in Bardstown now, and once I realized, I was like, oh, I've been to that one before, because I went there 8 times over the course of my high school years. And then coming back home after state, we would always do a banquet. I don't know when that tradition started, but I know it was there with me. We stop in E-Town, go to a Stone Hearth restaurant, have a big old buffet, strawberry butter, the whole shebang, and then all the seniors could speak. And that was our end of the year tradition, which was great. My senior year, of course, all the tears. During my speech and everyone else's, and then on the bus ride back home, I was captain, so I had to take attendance, and I couldn't handle attendance, so I gave the roster to Anna, one of my co-captains, named Matron of Honor for my wedding. Gave it to her because I couldn't do it, not because we didn't do as well as I'd hoped, but because I was like, oh crap, this is my last speech tournament. I hate everything, and I was just a wreck. But I couldn't stay away, so I didn't get to do it in college because mine did not have one. But I judged when I could, and now I'm coaching a team in Bardstown. So that's a little bit about me. So my career formally is not the things that I did at speech, but I definitely still use them. And at least I get to coach my own kids now and get to watch them develop in the same way they brought me up. So I'll do what I prepared now. Okay. Teachers matter. And I don't just say that because I am one. There are several that I adored and that I learned so much from. And there are a handful of them who changed my life. Debbie Stegner, Debbie Sogan, Tracy Lambert, Don Young, Ryan Marsh, Jay Ford, and Jim Combs. And for the one of you that's here, you will probably never hear me say your first name ever again. Mr. Combs was always trying to get me to call him Jim, but I never could do it. Despite that, Mr. Combs was family. He cared for me, he guided me, he spoke hard truths to me. So I'm not rude. Which one said, see through my crap, he's the one who could tell me what I needed to. So there was often that for practices for us, you'd sign up on Mr. Ford's or Mr. Combs' door. I would often try to get to Mr. Ford's door because it's a little more gentle than Mr. Combs was. But Mr. Combs is the one that really dug in and helped me the way I needed to and helped me develop this skill that I use every single day as a teacher. And I will think of Mr. Combs every time I play my piano, or I use the desk chair in my office at home, or I sit down to dinner and use my plates and my forks and my knives because he gave those things to me. Where our family was helping him clean out his mom's health, and he just kept shoving stuff at us. So I have a full set of dishes, which was hard to come by as a grown-up straight out of college with no stuff of my own. So I have a lot of dishes, a piano, just all of that from him because he was so generous and so loving because he could be. And being a good teacher was just a bonus part. Even though words are hard, and I definitely still trip over them, it is not for lack of training. When I need it, I can turn it on. Mr. Combs and Mr. Ford are why many of my students think I'm the best public speaker out of all of their teachers. I found that out by accident because I'm teaching a little baby speech unit with one of my classes, and it was just a little opener question. Who do you think is the best public speaker? And half of them said me, and I was like, oh, I promise I wasn't fishing for compliments, but thank you so much. I appreciate it. They are why my brand new principal noticed that I answered a question that was really tricky and worded funny so well. They are why I am now a speech coach. And like they taught me, I can now teach kids to disagree with people without losing friends, to see all of the different sides of an argument, and to hold my ground. These men are why I can be myself in the world. if it weren't for speech, I would still be a shy little girl, anxious with a mask for every occasion. I know who I am now. So, Mr. Combs, thank you. We may not get to enjoy Stonehearth strawberry butter together again, but a blessed eternity awaits. Have a great time worshiping your Savior until we meet again. I love you.
So that's my kid. When she became speech coach, because she didn't go to Bardstown to be a speech coach. They had a speech coach. Retired?
He was retiring
Retiring.
the year I got there, and so I joined him in the spring of my first year so that we could transition. And I took over after that.
Yes, Destiny and all that. The first tournament she hosted. First of all, guess who runs her judges lounge? I don't know. The first tournament she hosted, I remember sneaking into the office early on that morning, just watching, because it's been a few years since we judged, but you know the vibe, you know what goes on. And then during awards, I snuck into because we're cleaning up, I snuck into the auditorium and I'm watching on time exactly what said, listen, anal. But I saw Jim and Jay as I saw her up there at that podium as the coach. I saw everything that they poured into her, all the things that we've seen. And my gosh, these men were good. These men were so good. Thank you all for sharing. Emily, was it you that said that you think he was related to half of? Okay, funny story, but not really funny. We're at the grave. We went to, Jim is interred at Lexington Cemetery by his parents, with his parents. And we were there Friday morning, graveside. And the attendant is talking to us and telling us where to go. And then he turned to Jim's sister and says, you know, my last name is Combs. What? What do you mean? He's like, yeah, my last name is Combs. I'm from whatever county. She says, well, you're probably related to us. And Jim has probably met you. So yes, you're absolutely right, Emily. So when I talked to Kathy about planning this, I asked her, I said, I judge, should we give time limits? She says, not for the speech captains. I completely agree with that. Let you say whatever it is you needed to say. Now is the time when I'm going to speak some time limits. This is the time for public sharing. If you would like to come up and share a memory about Jim, I'm giving you 2 minutes. I see you back there, Eric Bird. You're on deck.
I'm going to be fast. I had no idea I was speaking today. I didn't know that public sharing was going to be a thing. Good news is one of my categories when I did speech team was impromptu speaking. Yes. We're going to see if I'm still any good. When I heard Mr. Combs had passed away, I was here in the era of Becky and Emily and Lydia back there. So we were here. I graduated in 96. So we were here in the 93 to 96 golden years of Lafayette speech. And I have a lot of random memories. I was in Mr. Combs's classroom when we heard about the Oklahoma City bombing. And I remember hearing it from one of my fellow students, right? And everyone wanted to immediately freak out. And the good news was we were all in Mr. Combs's room that morning, right? I remember him just having this presence of calm, you know, like I believe it was Becky you spoke about, just being able to sort of take us all down, you know, from this moment of panic and fear and being able to relate in that moment. Yeah, something terrible is happening this morning. I'm going to weave it into how that relates to U.S. history, right? Man came up with a lesson on the spot to help us with processing what we had just heard. Yeah, I am a teacher myself now. I've been in special education this is my 21st year. I'm really old. So I can appreciate now more than ever his skills as an educator, right? And I could tell you guys all the speech things too, that speech team was a safe place for us, that it was a source of a lot of fun and encouragement. I don't know if y'all know, we got personalized t-shirts at the end of every year. This was mine from senior year where I did storytelling, and this was my storytelling title. It had a frog in it anyway. So they did a lot for us. They did a lot of personal touches. I do want to tell you though, when I heard he had passed away, I thought about all the kind things he had done for me and the supportive things he'd done for me. I thought first, though, more so, of what he did for my brother. I have a brother who also came to Lafayette who has autism. And we were here in the era before, and listen, again, I'm a special ed teacher now. There are federal laws that govern special ed now. There are state laws. My brother was here in the late 90s when it was pretty much kind of the Wild West in terms of special education. And there wasn't a lot of guidance for teachers as to what they should do, what they needed to be doing for students with disabilities. And my brother struggled mightily, and my parents were miserable trying to get him through high school, right? He was constantly failing everything. There were constant meetings with staff, constant meetings with admin, trying to get him the help he needed, trying to understand even what is the help he needs. Because there just wasn't a lot of guidance back then for educators. And Mr. Combs was really a person who stepped up for my brother in those years, who not only was a source of kindness to my brother and to my whole family, but who really worked with my parents, even though my brother was not necessarily in his classes every year, the 4 years that he was in high school. Mr. Combs had met me. He had met my parents through speech. And then when my brother came through, he really did a lot of support and help for my brother throughout high school. And so whenever I heard he had passed away, sort of the first thing I thought was, oh, he was always so kind to my brother, right? And then I called my parents last night. I didn't know I was coming to this till 6 o'clock last night. I live in Columbus, Ohio. So I called my parents and I was like, hey, would it be cool if I swung down to Lexington tomorrow and spent the night and go back to work on Monday? Because I'm a teacher. I do the morning announcements every morning. I know nobody is listening. It's fine. They want the lunch and then they want to shut me off. It's cool. Anyway, but I called Mom and I said, Mom, I don't know. You remember, I think, Jim Combs, right? And Mom said, oh, yeah, of course. I remember him. And I said, well, he passed away a few weeks ago. And Mom says, oh, he was always so good to your brother. And he was always so helpful to us with your brother. So anyway, just, a little taste of what he meant to families, even outside of speech team. I just thought y'all would like to know because that's my favorite memories of him. So thank you.
Tom, you're on deck after Eric Bird.
So my name is Eric Bird, and I have two children. The first one is Christopher Bird, and the second is Kimberly Bird. They were both speeches, as we all love them. And they both found Jim Combs and J4 as a after-school activity. Sports didn't seem to work good well. They saw how injuries happened and all that kind of good stuff. And they weren't in some of the other different activities that they had, but they thought the speech team was going to work out. And I was like, speech team, what is that? So my son comes back and he tells me, oh, Dad, you got to understand, this is great. We get up there, we have like multiple different categories, and we can do all kinds of things, and then we compete. I said, okay, sounds good. Congratulations, go on your way. I'll be doing whatever I do. Well, unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, I was invited to come to one of the speech meets that they had here at Lafayette. And one thing that I didn't hear from anybody here talking earlier is one of Jim's secret little specialties. He is a very special, non-pushing salesman. And he sat there and said, you know, Eric, if you'd like to go and see what goes on, we could probably use you someplace in the team efforts of stuff. So I said, okay, fine. I said, so he asked me a few things. What are you good at? What do you like to do? And I'm a kind of a numbers cruncher guy. And he said, you know, speech team has this great little place called Tab Room. And he said, I need someone to help me out because I'm stuck in there all the time. So I said, sure, no problem. So at that time, I said, that's no problem. So he shows me how to do it, gets me all excited about it, and it's numbers crunching and paper and everything. And now that I keep doing this, he says, well, I feel confident in you. Now I can go out there and be with the students while you're inside. And as time continued on and I kept working and then eventually got into sectionals and regionals and all this, I was running the tab room for him most all the time. Now, the problem with most people, parents, teachers, maybe even some of the students, they never saw this. They just maybe have heard my name. But they do remember this because after the competition was done, everybody was over in the conference room, whatever. And I'm like this, Mr. Combs. Now, if anybody doesn't know what this is the results of who's winning all the different events and which school won. So there was always these students saying, Mr. Bird, who won? Did I win? Did I get first? You have to talk to Mr. Combs. So that was my little piece. Now, my late wife, she was one of the judges. They got her involved too. She loved to go and do poetry and some of the other softer, I say, kind of categories, which my daughter got involved in. My son, he was in extemp, and he was also in Congress. Now, the reason why I bring up those two is the ones that Jim suggested, and Jay as well. Now, my son, being with Congress, he got a chance to go to nationals, and that was great. He didn't win, but the point was Jim helped him out and everything. To this day, with Jim's help and bringing him up and being able to stand up in front of people and everything, he's now multiple times talked with the city council people in Jefferson County about the food system and helping students, regardless of financial background, to everyone have a free breakfast and free lunch. He is now an executive chef for the Jefferson County food system, public school system. So that's cool because we've talked about things that, we've heard people talk about how it's helped the two guys have helped them. Well, this is just another example of how far touching, as teachers know, how far touching your students with a seed, planting it and seeing where it goes. My daughter on the other side of the coin, bringing her out of her little shell, being able to stand up in front of people and everything. She is right now with her own musical group at the Ohio Renaissance Festival right now, this weekend, as well as 5 more weekends. And she has a group, and she plays up there her fiddle, and she does Celtic music. So again, a big thanks to Jim and Jay. Renaissance Festival, that was something that Jay kind of brought up with his swords and all of his other things that he talked about. When I wasn't doing the tab room, I was in competition with that gentleman right there on chili. I was originally called the chili guy, and then it was a competition. I recall that the two of us went into competition for Gigi Shuck, who was asked to come for broadcasting, and he would not come unless the two of us had chili for him. So although Penny did a fantastic job in the tab room and getting it all done, the two of us, I guess, kind of drew from the public as far as that goes. But I do. This last December, I retired, and Jim came to my retirement party, and that was the last time I got a chance to see him. Got a chance to spend a little bit of time with him. Being as close as we were, both in the tab room and with our kids, and practically raised my kids when my late wife and I were in school, college, as alternative students, whatever you want to call us. That was a safe place here. Lafayette was safe. Mr. McKenzie, he had a place. He had the ability for this to be a safe place. And Jim would talk about him as being that kind of mentor for him, so to speak, or someone who would help him out. And I can't say enough about the Lafayette teachers, the other teachers, as well as Jim and Jay, Penny, Claude, everybody that's been in here, some of the other students that may have recognized me, some of the other individuals that have seen me in tab room or maybe out wandering around. But I did want to go and say thank you very much for allowing me to spend a little bit of time up here. I greatly, greatly appreciate all Jim's activities, his work, his mentorship. He was definitely like a brother to me. And we're all sad, I know. But, like I think I saw in one of the posts on Facebook, the two of them are probably pleasant having me. So thank you very much.
Peggy, you're after talk. And Gabe, you're after Peggy.
I'm going to be a bit of a buzzkill.
Peggy,
Oh,
Peggy.
no.
Come here. After talk. Come here.
Oh, I'm
Come on, sit.
I want to thank Penny and everyone else who put this together. It's a little special for me to be here today. My name is Tom Four, and someone named James Johnson Four was my little brother. He was 6.5 years younger than me. And this is a place that Ann and I wanted to be here today. First met Jim back in the early 1980s when my late wife and my two children, Andrew and Heather, who are graduates of Lafayette, but never got in the speech team while they were here. They were more in the sporting end of things. Jim was working at, I think it was Second National Bank, and they had a branch over there in Fayette Mall. And we had our account there, so when we would do our banking, we would see Jim. And of course, later on, he got into education, and he and Jay finally got to be friends. And he was a friend of our family for many, many years, and was in and out of my parents' house, and just became a friend of ours. And of course, I didn't have children who were on the speech team, and so I wasn't a speech child's parent or anything like that. But I knew Jim from a different angle, and that was as a friend and a friend of the family, and a joined at the hip friend of my younger brother. And so over the years, we would see Jim, and he would be with our family, and my mother and father thought so much of him, and he them. And I guess I want to fast forward to when Jay became ill a few years ago. And of course, one of the first people to make themselves known to us was Jim Combs. Wanted to know how he could help, if there's anything he could do. And many times he helped us with getting Jay to his treatments, and did different things along the way, and was right there. It was a little perplexing sometimes when he would call to check on Jay, and we would be getting ready to go out the door to do something, and I'd say, Jim, I just have a few minutes. And then he would start to talk, as you know. 5 minutes became 10, 10, 15. I'd look at Ann and, do this.
finally I'd be able to get away from him. But you all know that you can never have a short conversation with Jim Combs. And so he was a really great encourager and a great help to us, especially through Jay's illness. And one of the things I want to leave you with, so many good things have been said about him and his character and his attitude and his faith. But as he got to be more of a friend of our family and my parents over the years, whenever I would see Jim and we would talk, and he would do something for us, and I would thank him, he'd say, "Hey, we're family. We're family." He always said that, and that's one of the last things I think he said to us. We took him to one of his treatments over at Central Baptist back earlier in the year, and he was doing pretty good then. And then we didn't have a lot of contact with him, and Ann and I, my current wife, were in Europe for about 5.5 weeks. And we were on one of those Viking cruises for 2 weeks, which was wonderful. Dream come true. About 3 or 4 nights before the cruise ended, he called. And I'm not a techie person. I hate to carry a cell phone. I don't even have it on me now. It's in the car. And we were out somewhere on the boat. And when I got back that night to the room, there was a message from Jim. And he had called to let us know that he had just been put under hospice treatment and that he wasn't doing good. And that was early in our trip. And I sent him a message back and told him we were thinking about him and we'd pray for him and that sort of thing. So that's one of the last communications I had with him. And then, of course, just after we got back, July 30th, I think he died, August 5th, something like that. So I just wanted to leave you with that because even as far as he was in his illness, he took the time to call us to let us know what his situation was. And I thought that was very, very thoughtful of him, knowing what Jay had gone through and knowing how bad he probably felt and all that was going on with him, that he would want us to know what his situation was. Thoughtful, kind, caring, considerate, knowledgeable, you can fill in the blank. And so many things describe Jim Combs. And I'll forever remember the relationship that he and Jay had. It was Jim and Jay, Jay and Jim. And of course, Jay's real name was Jim. So it was really Jim and Jim. But, he was a special guy. We all know that. And just want to thank you for inviting us to be here to share in this today. And I want to thank all of you. I don't know what your relationship might have been with Jim and Jay, student, co-worker, friend, whatever it might be. But just thank you for all that you've meant to them. Thank you.
I did promise the buzzkill. Jim Combs was Jim Trammell's first friend in Lexington, my husband. And as you may or may not know, when you're friends with somebody and you have with a speech coach and you have any aptitude at all, you're roped into judging. This was in your era. This was in the early 90s. Yes. Well, and so on my end of it, the third Saturday of January for a successive number of years, I was left at home all day Saturday with 2 first infants and then toddlers. What? So my first experience in speech was not favorable. But then when our son Carl came to Lafayette and he said, I think I'm going to audition for speech team, and we said, that's great. So he was also a bandy. So he didn't get involved with speech until after the band season was over. And then he came to us and said, I've changed my mind. I'm not going to do it. He said, yes, you are. Yes, you are. You committed to it. You have to do it. You have to do it for 1 year. If you don't like, if you don't like it, you don't have to continue. And we might have told you this in subsequent years, Carl, but it was mostly because Jim was our friend. And we did not want to be embarrassed because our kid brought out his team.
Bob, that was literally 2 weeks ago.
Anyway, so thank you all. And the experiences and the specialists is just, we have it forever. So thank you.
With rebuttal here.
On the bag.
For anybody who's not familiar with speech terminology, I am also not an impromptu. I'm an HI person, which is humorous intern. So I can't promise that I'm going to be funny, but we're going to try. So like my mom just mentioned, I was involved in 4 different groups when I was in high school. I was in band, I was in the choir, I was in the speech team, and I was in musical theater. They're all special in their own ways. But there's really not any kind of community like speech. I mean, Mr. March over there helped me find my singing voice, of course. But had it not been for Mr. Combs and Mr. Four, I don't think I would find, my regular speaking voice. And also this really weird old man voice that they kind of weaned me onto that I did for an HI piece. The only thing I remember from that piece is, "Make the joyful sound, Lawrence. My milkshake brings out the boys to the earth." They kind of made me up to that kind of character voice, which kind of really helped in the long run. And on top of that, that's pretty much what I do for work. I work for the Spindletop DMV, and every single day I get comments from people about, you've got a really good radio announcer voice. Do you ever get tired of saying the same things? And every single time I simply say, no, it's like rehearsing for a play or like rehearsing a speech piece. And on top of that, I was also an announcer for the state marching band contest 2 years ago, and I don't think I would have even entertained in emailing KMEA about that had it not been for the community that was established here because Mr. Combs and Mr. Ford gave them to us. And yeah, it's a wonderful, wonderful thing to have carried into the adult life. I'm going to very much miss both of them, but I know they're up there, and I know that Mr. Combs definitely has his tweed jacket, and Mr. Ford is definitely up there with the trench coats.
I'm going to kind of stand in the middle and hopefully project. All right. Now, my name is Wanda Barr, and I taught business at Lafayette for about 16 years. 1 year, I was assigned a study hall, and my room was a computer lab. So I was assigned to use Jim Combs' room. I didn't know him before I had to go upstairs and take care of study hall. Okay, when I go up there, Mr. Combs is sitting at his desk, and I walk in. He looks busy. I walk in, and I think I'm not going to disturb him. I'm just going to pull a student desk to the front and sit there. So when I was doing that, he looked up and said, "Oh, no, you're not going to use a student desk." He said, "I'm not going to stay in here. So you move over to the teacher's desk." So I did. Then he pulls out the drawers and everything. And he says, "I knew you were coming, so I got some extra supplies. If you need any red marking pencils or anything like that while you're up here, just look in the drawer and get them. I've got plenty." Okay, so a bunch of boisterous boys come into the study hall. And Mr. Combs looks at me and he says, "Oh," he said, "you might need some help with this." He said, "If you need any help, I'll stay." And I said, "No, everything will be fine." So he said, "Well, I'm going to the teacher's lounge." I said, "Okay, see you later." So these boys come in and they're making all kind of noise and scooting desks and stuff. And I have to read them their rights. So I tell them, every day. When you come in here, you're going to take a seat and you're going to take out a book and some paper, and you're going to be working on an assignment from bell to bell. You got that? Okay, so they sit down, they look at me all weird. And they're saying, oh, this woman's crazy. So they take a seat and everything. And then I tell them, I'm going to put you in alphabetical order. There's no talking in study hall either. And I just said, when you come in here every day, you are going to work. So I put them in alphabetical order. They're still looking at each other like, this woman is really crazy. So they sit down and we get to work and everything's fine. About 5 minutes before the bell, I stand up again. And I say, look, this is not my room. And you are not going to cause any trouble between myself and Mr. Combs. When you leave this room each day, you look on the floor by your desk. If there's any paper down there, you pick it up. I don't care whether you put it there or not, you pick it up. And when the bell rings, you get up, you make sure your desk is straight, and you put your chair under the desk when you leave. Okay, so that goes fine. They do exactly as I tell them to do. And when Mr. Combs walks back in the room, he is so surprised. He says, what happened? And I said, I read them their rights. So we got along that year just fine. And I it can be difficult to share space. And I kind of had a reputation for being hard to get along with and being real strict and everything. But Mr. Combs and I never had any type of disagreement at all the year that I used his room. So I retired in 1999, and I didn't hear from Mr. Combs again until about 2015, something like that. And we connected again on Facebook. We have some similar political interests, so we kept sharing articles back and forth. And then there's a space on there, most of you know, where you can send messages to each other. Then we started sending messages. And about once a month, I would look on Facebook and my little screen would be lit up and I had a message, and it would be from Jim Combs. And he would be asking how I'm doing. And then I would be telling him, I've got arthritis, but otherwise I'm doing fine. And then down to the end, very end, he told me that he had cancer. And he told me he had treatment and he thought he was doing pretty well. And if he needed additional treatment, there was a new one that they thought they could use. And it was related to radiation therapy. And it was a special type of tool that they were using where they could pinpoint cancer cells and destroy cancer cells without damaging living cells. So he gave me the title of this thing, Slice the Knife, which scared me to death. And he said, no, he said, it's not invasive. He said, I want you to do some research on it. And he said, let me know what you think. So I did, and we got back in touch. I had 3 cousins. I lost 3 cousins to pancreatic cancer. So I was scared, okay? But when I read that, I thought, oh, this holds real promise. So I told Jim, I said, yeah, I think this may help you. But then the last time I heard from him, he said, my illness is terminal. I'm in hospice. And I wrote back and I said, well, you need to know how much I appreciate your kindness and your friendship over the years. And he just wrote back, thank you. And I wrote back, what am I supposed to do? Can I come and see you or talk to you on the phone or something? And he said his phone number. And I tried to contact him by phone, but I never did. So I got to tell him how wonderful he was, but I didn't get to see him before the end. And I really wanted to do that. But I will always remember that I got along with Jim Combs when I couldn't get along with anybody
Hello, my name is Erin Wagner. I was speech team captain the year I graduated in '96. And Bert, what I have to say about Jay and Jim also applies to you.
No.
So, I did not have a happy home life. And I knew I wasn't happy growing up, but I didn't realize how bad it was until I became an adult. But now that I can look back, I'm 46 years old. I can look back and I can say that theater provided the safe place for me that I did not have otherwise. And it provided the family for me that I needed. So thank you. And I am eternally grateful to Jay and Jim and Bert for giving me an outlet, something that I felt like I was good at. And it's funny when I look back and I remember my speech ballots. I had very inconsistent ballots. And my best friend was Joy Gonzalez. And Joy Gonzalez was consistently the winner of every tournament, every category she ever competed in. And she qualified for nationals every year. And I was floundering in all over, let's try any category under the sun. And I remember my ballots. I would come back with a 1 and an 8 from the same rounds. Right. And I was just so inconsistent. And it would have been so easy for me to get discouraged. But Jim and Jay, they had a way of setting the tone where somewhere within me I found some tenacity to just keep trying, lick my wounds, you got it next time. Look, you got that 1. We're going to build on this. And so I appreciate so much their encouragement, the time they spent with all of us, and they gave us that safe space. I knew where I could go after school. I knew whose room I could go to. And there was a group of friends, and there was a group of people. My mother was a secretary at Central Baptist Church, which was about a 20-minute walk from school. So for hours after school, I was able to go and have a place to be, and then I could walk to the church after that. And having a place to be on weekends, and just having a group and a purpose, and it just really gave me life lessons and life skills. And then to be voted captain of the speech team, like that was a huge personal boost that I just really needed in my life. So they changed my life. I'm now living in Atlanta, Georgia. I am stuck there. I would love to come back here. It is crazy to me. Georgia has a lot going for it. It does not have a speech program. The state does not have it. And my kids go to one of the best high schools in the state, and they have one of the best theater departments in the state, and nobody there has ever heard of speech team. And I think that is a crying shame. And when everyone there thinks speech team is debate team. And I have to tell them, no, it is not debate team. There are all of these different categories. And even kids who do badly have a place there. And so it makes me appreciate what we have here in Kentucky. Want to also share that speech team gave me my best friend, Joy. We still talk on the phone. She's in Florida now, but she was my safe person throughout my life. My marriage fell apart, marriage of 20 years. I finally wised up, realized it was abusive, needed to leave with 3 kids. I had been a stay-at-home mom. I had no income. I was terrified. I had no family around, but I had joy. And I don't think I would have had my best friend to help me get through that if it had not been for speech team. And so then when I was broke, no job whatsoever, I tried all of my skills. And one of my skills was I'm an artist too. So I went to our local high school theater department and I painted their sets. They paid me $25 an hour. And I felt like I was going home because I was going to a theater program. And that little department, I did that for a few years. And then I got my real estate license. And thank God I tried that. And just 3 years later, I'm the #1 agent in my office. But I would not have been able to do that without speech team and without theater. And part of why I've been able to, and if you don't know the industry, it is a crazy industry and finding clients is so hard. And there's no paycheck unless you got your clients and unless you make a sale. But because of speech team, because of Mr. Combs and Mr. Four and Bert, I'm able to look into a camera and do a little video. I'm able to go to networking groups and I can give a 3-minute presentation on why you need to use me as your realtor. So I have a career now that can support me and my 3 kids because of speech team. And I'm not freaked out at the idea of standing in front of a group of people because of my theater teachers. So the last thing I'd like to say is, as an adult, I've had recurring dreams throughout my life. I dream very vividly. I'm very creative, have a big imagination, and I remember my dreams. But the best recurring dream I have is when I wake up, or not wake up, but I'm dreaming, and it's the night before a speech tournament. And I've been away forever, and I don't have anything prepared. But it's a speech tournament. Wait, I can still sign up. And so I go and I sign up, and the bus is coming, and I'm so happy that, wait, no, I can jump back in. And I know it's been forever, but no, I can go compete again. And I'm just so happy, and I'm terrified too, and I'm hoping it's prose and not solo acting. So that I can have a book to read instead of having to wing it or have somebody memorize. But that's the impact that theater and speech team made on my life. So that emotional connection, that I'm just so happy to be going home. And Jim knew how to do that, and Jay. So thank you.
All right. Oh God, this has been great, y'all. So before we wrap up, we have 2 more things. Kathy Myers is Jim's niece, and she will be speaking on behalf of the family. And then I'll be a slutty mess in the back when they sing Irish Blessings, so choir kids. And listen, he has sheet music. If you weren't under Marsh and you're a choir kid, you want to sing Irish Blessing, he'll help you through it. Just want to share 2 more things. One, around the last month, 6 weeks, would you say, Mike, that we had Jim, when he really started to decline, he wasn't eating. But what he really, really was subsisting on, he loved Frosties. My gosh, he had his Peggy, bring him food, bring him a Frosty. So I thought of something weird. I reached out to Wendy's and I told them Jim's story. On that table are little cards for free Frosties. If you would like to take a card. Now you got to be here because you can't live in Chicago and take, because apparently she's for the local ones. But if you would like a Frosty, there, please take those with you. And the other thing is, I want to read this, and then Kathy, I'll let you come up. I am firm in my belief that a teacher lives on and on through his students. Good teaching is forever, and the teacher is immortal. Jesse Stewart. You shared that with me, Mike, and I think about something that Kathy said. So Kathy, a bit after Jim passed, to post something, but she talks about how they live on in her kids, every speech kid she has. That's that immortality. And I'm done.
Wow, my uncle was busy. I just thought he was. I just thought he was at home watching old movies all the time. He would do that. So he would be so touched by all of these speeches and so proud of y'all. Thank you so much. To you, he was Mr. Combs or Jim, but to me, he was Uncle Jim, my mom's brother. As a little girl, I remember thinking he was a giant, but he was a gentle giant. He had that booming voice and that deep, hearty laugh. He was always sharing stories about distant family relatives. You guys got stories about Lafayette Theater. I heard about like great aunts and uncles and distant cousins and had no idea who they were, but heard all the stories. He always told me about old movies and musicals like Carousel and The King and I. And to a kid, that was all pretty boring. You know, I was more interested in Madonna and the Karate Kid. But then, when I was in college, he asked me to help chaperone a trip to New York City with his Lafayette students. And for the first time, I saw him through the eyes of his students, and they absolutely adored him. And I realized Uncle Jim is actually cool. Of course, as an adult, I grew to admire him and all of his passions. He was loyal, full of life and joy, and truly saw the best in everybody. He was so proud of his former students, as he called them, and he talked about you guys all the time. Every time we were together, he did. He truly loved and cared about each and every one of you and was your biggest champion. I visited with my uncle hours before he passed. People had stopped by that day and left notes. There was a small bouquet of flowers from a former student. He woke up and I had the opportunity to read to him some of the notes. You know, I didn't know if he had been able to talk to some of the people. One was on the back of a picture of the Lafayette High School, like postcard. And I read it to him. I said, "Is that a former student?" And he smiled and said, "Yes." I said, "Lafayette was so special to you." And he smiled again and said, "Yes." I told him how beloved he was and how many lives that he had impacted. He tried to ask how my family and even my best friend growing up were doing by saying their names. Even as in his last hours, he was caring about others and asking about my life. I happen to be his biological family, but you all, his Lafayette family and the theater community, were his family by choice. Thank you for loving him and for all the joy you brought to his life. A huge thank you to Penny Christensen and Mike and their families for making him a part of your families. You two are the best friends that anyone could ever ask for. I'm so grateful that he had you. Personally, I will miss Uncle Jim's huge smile, his heart laugh, and his big hugs. He did the best hugs. He was always so effusive with praise. It just always made me feel so special. He had such a strong faith, and I know that if there's a heaven, he is there. I also know if there are guardian angels, that everybody in this room has a new one. And I know that he will always continue to watch out for you and to be your biggest cheerleaders. Thank you all so much.
So, the day before Jim passed, some of the staff went to visit him. And they called me and they said, "We want to go over tomorrow and we want to give Jim something." Could we do that? You can always take business, right? But 2 o'clock that morning, I got the call. This was going to go in the hospital. It says Lafayette High School. Once a general, always a general award. James Combs.
Sweet, thank you.
with me always at your back. May the sun shine warm upon your face, the rain fall soft upon your face. And until we meet again, until we meet again, may God take the on his hand. And until we meet again, until we meet again, may God take the on his
All right, you guys. Let's have Fresca cookies and breakfast. Because that's what Jim would have eaten. Ate it. Yeah. Right. And please come get the frosty. Thank you all for coming, for letting me do this. Yeah.